All right, let's do our second worksheet, and it's about multiplication and division. So let's do some rules here. The rules are actually, what's nice about this is the rules are exactly the same for multiplication and division. All right, so we're going to break it up into two categories. If I multiply two numbers together, what could my signs possibly be? Negative and positive, okay, and what else? What other options do I have? Both could be what? Positive, or both could be negative. So what I do is I say same signs and different signs. All right? So the rule for the same signs, whether they're both positive or both negative, the rule is exactly the same. All right? And it's a very easy rule. So when you're multiplying, this is multiplying and dividing. Again, it's the same exact rule for multiplication and division. When they have the same signs, your answer, oops, let me write that a little bit better. Your answer is always, any guesses? When they're the same signs, what is the sign of your answer always going to be? Nope. What is it? Positive. It's always going to be positive. So it doesn't matter if they're both positive or both negative. Your answer is always going to be positive. You taking notes? Doesn't look like you're taking notes. Anything on your desk? Nothing on your desk. That's not a good start. Take notes. We got to take notes. All right, you should be writing this down. Your answer is always, what did I say? Positive. Come on, you got to get in the swing of things. Okay, we've talked about that you got to take notes. Look around. Almost every single person in here has got a notebook in front of them and they're writing stuff down. Peer pressure can be good sometimes. There is a positive peer pressure. So the pressure should be to do what the other people in this class are doing right now, and that's taking notes. All right, enough of that. I'll keep going. Yes, sir. Just stretching? All right. So when you have the same signs, the answer is always positive. So let's do a couple easy examples. So 3 times 2. This is how we show multiplication. You did that in Algebra 1, didn't you? Use parentheses. Okay, sometimes you can use a dot, but that's kind of outdated. The higher up you go in math, it's a little outdated. They usually use parentheses. Now, one thing that we don't really use anymore is what? When you're a kid, what was the x? Okay, so 3 times 2. They all mean the same exact thing. This is what you need to get used to seeing. Everybody got that? All right. After saying that, I'm looking at the worksheet, and they use the x, okay, for times, all right? But when I do stuff here, I'll use the parentheses, all right? You could also write it like this. You could also just put the 3 on the outside and the 2 in parentheses. That means multiplication as well, okay? This is probably, again, the higher up you get into math, the more you'll see it probably like this. Any of those mean multiplication. But when they're both positive, what's my answer going to be? Positive 6. What if they were both negative? It's still a positive 6. So it doesn't matter which one is the bigger one with multiplication and division, does it? Okay, that's only addition and subtraction. Okay, with multiplication and division, the rules are exactly the same. So when they're the same sign, your answer is always positive. What if they were different signs? Can you wait? Can you wait? I'm like, you really got to go? All right, give it to me. What was the question? I don't know. What did I ask? Different signs, yeah. Here, if you don't come back. Oh, where did I put them? I put them right here. Here, take that, in case you don't come back. All right, so different signs. The answer is always, I'm just going to put a little arrow here, is that all right? The answer is always, what do you think? Negative. Okay, so when you have different signs, this is when you're talking about 2, when you're multiplying 2 numbers together, okay? Not 3 or 4 or 5, but when you have 2 different signs, your answer is always negative. So if I had negative 3 times positive 2, what's my answer? Negative 6. Okay. Does it matter? Let's do this. Does it matter which one is negative? Doesn't make any difference at all. Okay, the bigger one's negative here, it's -6, and the smaller one's negative here, and it's still what? -6. It doesn't make any difference whatsoever, right? Very simple rule. It's way easier, I think, don't you think, than addition and subtraction? Yeah. So if they're the same signs, again, two numbers, if it's the same sign, it's always positive, different signs, your answer is always negative. Division is the same exact thing. Now, when you start getting into algebra and further on, they kind of don't do this division symbol anymore. All right, I'm going to go 12 divided by 3. This is what you see. Now, again, with that said, guess what this worksheet does? They put that division sign here. But they do it another way as well. They do both ways. I'll show you both ways. So this is division. But when you get into algebra, you rarely see that little sign right there. All right? Actually, there's times in a higher math when you're doing these really big, long, complicated things that they put that division sign in there. So every once in a while you see it, but most of the time you don't. Usually they show it as a fraction. So if I put 12 over 3, that's division. It's not just a fraction. A lot of people look at it and say, oh, that's a fraction. Well, yeah, technically it is a fraction, but it's also division. It's 12 divided by 3. And what is 12 divided by 3? 4. And they're both positive, so what's my answer? Both positive, okay? Or I could write, they do use this in the worksheet, all right? But they also do this as well. So what about this? What if I had -12 divided by -3? That's +4 again. Why? Because the signs are the same. That's right. So that's +4. Everybody good with that? All right. Let's switch it up. Let's go -12 divided by what? +3. That would be -4. That's right, because the signs are different. The top one is negative, the bottom one is positive, so that would be -4. What if I did this? 12 divided by -3. Same exact thing. It's -4. Too easy, right? Yeah. Well, maybe not too easy, but it is easy. I get accused a lot of times of saying that too often, that it's too easy. But this is one situation where it is easy. Would you agree? Yeah, I think so. Let me show you one more thing about fractions. It seems like students, they don't either remember it or never learned it. I'm not really sure. Let's just do a regular fraction. What if I said -2 over 3? Now, you can't really reduce it, can you? It just stays 2/3. Now, I could put it into a calculator, right? It would be like 0.6666 repeating, all right? But what's the sign going to be? It's going to be what? It's going to be negative. What about this? What if I had 2 divided by -3? That's going to be negative, isn't it? So you could do either way, but here's what you'll see every once in a while. With if you have a negative fraction, you could have the negative on the top or the negative on the bottom, or you could have it, right up front. Okay, that's a negative. This means the same thing. All three of these are exactly the same, right? This is -2/3, that's -2/3, and this is -2/3. A lot of people get confused about that. So if you have a negative out in front, that means you could either put it on the top or where? On the bottom. Does that make sense? Okay. Maybe you already knew that, but maybe you didn't. So that's why I hit that. All right, let me take a look at this worksheet. And, let's do this. We talked about two numbers. They don't do this too often in here. Most of the problems on the worksheet are just two numbers. But at the end, they got 6 problems at the end where they do more than 2 numbers. So let's do this. Yeah, we got time. So let's go, we'll keep the numbers small. -2 times +1 times -3. All right, we'll just do it like that. Now, right off the bat, I'm not necessarily going to do this and then multiply it by that. I mean, I kind of am, but I'm not. So let's take a look. That's right. So what I want to do is I want to see how many negatives I have. All right. So if I got two negatives, right? So negative times negative is always what? Positive, all right? So that would be a positive what? 6. Now I'm not going to put numbers in here. I'm just going to put some negatives and positives. So negative, 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 positive, negative, oops, and another negative. Oops, not a 1. Boom. Now there's no numbers in here, but let's just look at the signs. What's the sign of that answer if I multiply those together? How do you know it's positive?
It'll come out a negative because it's an odd amount of...
There you go. That's what I wanted to hear. Let's count up how many negatives I have. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got 5 negatives. That's an odd number, isn't it? Okay, so an odd number of negatives is always going to give you a negative answer. Okay? So an odd number of negatives is always going to be not odd. It's going to be what? It's going to be negative. An odd number of negatives is always going to be negative. So really all you got to do, if you got a whole bunch of them, just count up your negatives. Don't worry about your positives. Forget about that. Just look at the negatives. How many negatives do you have? All right, if you have an odd number of them, which we had 5, 5's an odd number, that answer is negative. What do you think if you have an even number? Then your answer is positive. Okay? So that's a nice, easy way. So if you have more than 2, does it work with 2? Sure it does, because if I got 2 negatives, that's what? That's even, and 2 negatives is always positive. What if I just have 1 negative? Well, 1 is odd, right? So that answer is negative. Did you know this before? Yeah, this is probably an Algebra 1 topic that you should have already known. But again, we're just reviewing. We're just doing an algebra review and just trying to get the cobwebs right out of your brain, get the summer out of your brain is what I like to say, all right? And hopefully you might recall some stuff that you learned, and maybe you'll see some stuff that you didn't learn, all right? But a lot of the stuff that we're doing right now will be used in geometry at some point or the other, right? That's why I'm doing this. I'm not just doing this just because I'd rather teach algebra. I'm doing this because this is going to help you in geometry, I promise. Everybody good? All right. So your homework is a worksheet I'm going to give you in a second, and it's called Worksheet 2. All right, and that is your homework. Now we only have 5 minutes left, so you won't be able to get a lot of them done, but there's a lot of problems. There's 36 problems, but really, they're so quick. Most of these, you should just be able to do in your head and write down the answer. Most of them, until the end. Until you got to number 31, then you might have to show some work. But almost every single one of these, you can just look at and write down the answer. All right, so it should go pretty quick for you. Everybody good?